Um, I'm Rhonda Deeg, and I restore and repair stained glass windows is probably one job that I do. My background is in the preservation trades, and I'm also an artisan, so I also do mosaic glass, and my daughter loves pottery, and I paint, and so there's a lot of different things. But repairing and restoring stained glass windows is part of the preservation trades, and that's my background. So I have been in historic buildings ever since I was wee little, and so it really comes naturally to me. If you get on to the Newport, Kentucky Restoration Weekend website and you look at the videos for 2022, you'll see me there. There's a video. They did the same thing that they're doing now. They filmed me last year. So I'm not even going to talk about everything that I talked about last year, because you can get on the site and you can watch that. In fact, it's an hour long, and I didn't even touch partly my PowerPoint the whole time. So I was really discussing types of glass. And because a lot of people ask me about matching pieces and about repairing their glass and whether I can obtain the same glass and that type of thing. So please ask me questions as we go along, okay? And I'm going to be passing things out for you because I'm a touch-feel person. I have to touch my glass and I have to be with it. So I'm that kind of person that I'm going to be handing those things to you as we go along. So I'll be doing a lot of moving. That's why I brought the tables closer to me. I really like them really close, but that way I can move around and kind of discuss this a little bit further. I've been doing glass for 30 years, in and out of working full-time teaching jobs and other jobs. And it's the last 15, 20 years that I've been working really as a business as well as another full-time job. And in 2019, I retired from that particular nonprofit job and just went into glass full-time. Because it's kind of tough to work 2 full-time jobs and sleep. And that is something that I want to do once in a while. And I work with glass 7 days a week. I love it. I live in it. I have my studio is the same place where I live. So we do have to be careful when you start at one part of your house and you jump into your studio that you're using different shoes. You're not carrying the lead and the dust from one area to the next, and so. We are watching ourselves all the time, and I say we because my daughter works with me in the business, and so we're very careful about how we transfer things from the house proper to the studio. So I'm very lucky. I bought an old building. I always wanted to do that as a kid, and have an old building and live in it and something different, and that's what I have. So I'm just going to fast forward really fast. Some of you know about glass, or you worked with glass, and we use the term stained glass as a general term, so you're going to hear me say stained glass, and really what I probably mean is art glass, because not all glass is stained and not all glass is painted. So we have different levels of types of windows that we work with. And I work with all of them. Leaded glass, stained glass, bevel glass, art glass, etched glass, painted glass, you name it. Copper foil, lead, zinc. So there's a lot of different levels here. But we all kind of use the terminology stained glass as a general term, and that's all right. That's how I will use it as we go along here. I just want you to know that. The colors of glass are actually, when the glass is hot and molten, the minerals are put into clear glass to make color. So that's why you see the colors today that are available with the factories. The color goes all the way through that sheet when it's actually made, and then it is rolled out onto a table between different rollers. And those rollers could be smooth rollers, which gives you a smooth texture, or they could be like a roller that has smooth on one side and is rippled on the other. Okay? And the new rollers, or the rollers that are being used today in the glass factories, and we only have a few of them across the United States left, those rollers do not match the old textured glass that a lot of your old windows have. And they just don't. Kokomo opalescent glass in Kokomo, Indiana is about the only one that still uses its same rollers that they've used since 1886. However, like they tell me, Rhonda, our rollers wear out, you know, so we have to have new ones. Because I'll go in and go, this isn't the same as this, and it's the same. You know, and they'll say, yeah, but the roller, we had to change the roller, so the depth is going to be a little bit different. Well, I want what you had 200 years ago. So, you know, so I have to keep those things in mind as I'm going along. But those colors are made by either artificial minerals or natural minerals. Okay? So this is just, if you read through it, exactly what I just told you. The glass is put into a kiln, and it's hot and molten. It's raised up to a particular temperature where it becomes liquid molten, and then it's drawn out onto a table. Okay? And I love this picture because it comes out of one of my glass books from 1884. This is the way they used to do it. And when we talk about cylinder glass, and maybe one of the wood restoration people discuss that, and why you have old glass with maybe waviness in it that's clear glass, or old glass that might be kind of, you'll see the circular, you know, striations in that glass. It's because it was probably made in cylinders, and then while it was hot, they cut it and they flatten it. And that's how the clear glass was made. Okay, so there are different types of glass that I have my hands on all the time. And cathedral is one of them. Lots of cathedral glass out there. That would be pieces like this that are different colors, but they're transparent. Okay, that's cathedral glass. It's transparent. I'm just going to pass around these, and you can put them up in, you know, look in the light, because that's the best way to do it. And just pass them around. There's different colors, and there are also glass that's called streaky glass. So it'll have streaks in it. And this just comes from, this company is called Wismach, and Wismach glass is made in West Virginia. And they roll glass pretty standard with very little what I call seediness, you know, the bubbles in glass. It's pretty clear texture-wise all the way through. So that's cathedral glass. Opalescent glass is opaque glass, so it's a little bit denser, and it has milky streaks through it. So we're looking at pieces like this, and I'm sure you've seen all of this. If you've gone through churches, or maybe you have a home that has stained glass in it, and the glass that you cannot see through it all the way, but it has striations of milky, you know, color through it. That's what we call opaque glass. Now, every company has different opacities to their glass. They'll go from kind of a light all the way to a very dense type of opaque glass. Okay? I'll just pass these out. And this is my sample box that I use in demos all the time. So if it all is mixed up, it doesn't bother me any. But I'll tell you, there's about 2,000, a little bit more than that, but a little over 2,000 colors and textures of glass available today. So when a client comes to me and wants to build a new window, if I showed them 2,000 samples, which I probably have in my shop, it would overwhelm them, okay? So you always have to narrow things down when you're working with new panels, when you're on new commissions, because it can get overwhelming. And for me as an artist, it sometimes is overwhelming in matching colors to ones that I have to match, because I will belabor for hours until I find almost an exact match. I'm going to head through this. Now there's different phases of work that I do, okay, with my repairs. Somebody today asked me about building a new panel, and I'll show you what I've done with, I'll show you what I've done with fire restoration. But there's these different levels really have different steps within each of them. And I probably do about 98% of what I do is restore and repair. So that gives you an idea. I'm commissioned to do new work, but most of my work is restore and repair. So one of the things I do is preservation. If you're familiar with the guidelines, National Park standards, stained glass restoration has the same type of standards. So I work very close with those standards from the Stained Glass Association of America. They have their own booklet that is a standard and guideline for repairing glass. So in preservation, it's mostly cleaning. You know, you really don't touch those pieces with abrasive things, okay? So I use cotton tips, cotton nibs, and I roll it across the panel with distilled water only. We get all the soot and a lot of the black dirt off of those painted pieces. And it's done very meticulously and many hours, okay? But these two pieces come from a church called St. Michael's the Archangel in Madison, Indiana. And these pieces, this one here was above the altar. And really no need to touch this piece other than clean it, which is what I did. So I do a lot of that. This is a job that I just finished last year in Quincy, Illinois. So I cover about 5 states all around in the Midwest. Drive all over. And this was called the Founder's Window, which was above the altar proper. Quincy Unitarian Church. This beautiful painted window. Now, part of this is art glass. This is art glass here, and this part is painted. This shows you how I document things before I even touch anything. So I'm taking a lot of photographs. I mark those photographs. I number the photographs. And then that way, as I'm working on that piece, when it's done, then I'll take another shot, and that is given to the church in a report so they can see, and I explain exactly what I do, because many times I'm there by myself. It's beautiful to be in a church by yourself. I'm in a lot of churches by myself, so it's my zen. So I'm up on scaffold working on this with cotton nibs. And the reason why they hired me is because this section here was dark, and this little panel was light. And the synopsis was, this is supposed to be blue. You know, isn't it a sky? We need a blue sky. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You know, I walk very gently through things. And I said, let me start cleaning this. This was done in 1916 by a Chicago artist. So whatever I touch, I have to be very careful. And I'm not going to do any damage to somebody else's artwork, because I wouldn't want them to do the same to mine. So I was very careful. So as I'm cleaning this window, found out that one of their pastors, maybe 10 years ago or more, and his wife decided also to clean the window and felt that had turned black up above here, which it was black, it was soot. So they used a spray window cleaner and sprayed into this area and then wiped it off and found that the paint came with it, so they stopped. So when they stopped, this was the area that they cleaned. And then these areas had little spots on them all the way down. So that's how I knew it. And then I went to the person that I was working with and I said, this seems like somebody cleaned. And then she told me the story. So I didn't hear the story until I was already up on scaffold cleaning this. And I said, well, that's what happened. I mean, I don't use window cleaners on any art glass or stained glass. I use distilled water only. You don't want to use any chemicals or any kind of, even your tap water has, it's been cleaned by sewage system somewhere with some kind of chemicals. I don't know what that is. So she said, oh, yeah. She said, that's what happened. So she said, can you make that black now? So it looks like, and I said, well, I'm not touching the original painter's paint. So on the outside, on the exterior, I use glass paint and sizing, and I touched it, just tapped it a little bit, and now this is what it looks like now, and they unveiled it. So cleaning, you can see there's still some darkness to it because I'm not going to sit there and scrub that soot off. You know, it's just very, and believe me, I had a lot of dirty cotton nibs, and I used big cotton nibs and just kept rolling them over until most of the soot was gone. So, and then the rest of it was all cleaned the same way in the art glass here. And then I also look when I'm doing a job like that. This is a little one here. This is a good example. So then I go through, and like I was doing on here, I might pick out with dental tools any, and I do it all by hand, any putty, well, I call it putty. In the stained glass world, it's called cement. I don't like using that word because people associate that with Portland cement. There's no Portland in it. This putty that I put underneath here is a linseed oil-based putty, and I make it the way the old traditional people made it back 200 years old, 200 or more. But anyways, if it's brittle, then I scrape it out, and then I re-putty by hand. Yeah?
Thank you. This has been so helpful for me. So I have an old stained glass window, and I assumed that I wouldn't have the capability to clean it because it would be too
You
much.
do.
But so that's what the
I can come and help you and teach you how to do it.
But so just get the distilled water. That would be great, and then just
Soft rag,
a
distilled
soft
water.
pot. You said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And don't.
Now, if it's a window like, if it,
no, that they
right.
can't use any glass cleaner.
Right.
Just do it
Oh,
yourself.
glass cleaner has plasticizers in it.
I learned a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
If this is not a painted window, that was a painted window. If this is just a regular,
It's more
stick,
traditional, but actually I'm not 100% sure, but it's more like
it's like an art glass, then you can use brass bristle brushes, and you can actually,
it's more effective than a gentle
yes,
cloth.
yes, or soft toothbrushes.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, yep. Okay, so then we do conservation too. So conservation actually is mostly when I go out on a job and I'm working in situ, which is in place. So we will scaffold in situ, and most of you were at Terry's presentation, and Terry scaffolds my jobs for me. We work together on a lot of different jobs, and I work with a lot of contractors because I can't do everything anymore. But so we'll scaffold a job, and I will get up on scaffold and I'll clean things in situ. So this is a job that I did in Madison, Indiana. It's for this Presbyterian church about probably 6-7 years ago. And this is what, when they had me come out and do a consult, this is what I found on the outside. So this is a plexiglass material. Plexiglass is a company name, but there's a lot of acrylics out there you probably know of. And what happens is they craze and they turn gold through years. Okay, back in the 70s, when we had the bicentennial in this country, everybody wanted to get everything all crisp and clean, and the National Trust was out there and they were pushing people. I know, I remember. And it was just like, let's clean our country across this, away and clean up all of this. And then we had the energy crisis, so you have both of those, and people were trying to close up their windows. So they used acrylics, and I see this across the board. And I can pretty much say, oh, that was done in 78, right? 77, pretty much know that. And if you notice this, the meeting rails don't meet up with the meeting rails in the window. So that's the first thing I said. The second thing was, look at all the paint problems they have on the surround. And then the third thing is, there's no venting to this. You've got to vent your art glass windows.
Amen.
You have to, you have to vent them. You can't think that you can trap this lead in a hot box and it not move, because it's pliable and it will move. So when it heats up to 200 degrees or more, and you're sitting on the south side, this is a piece of lead, and I'll pass these around, it moves. So you have lead that moves, you have glass that moves, you have wood that moves, and it all just kind of goes like this. And you heat it up, and then we have nights around here, it'll go down to 30, and then it'll go back up to, 75 the next day. And then now you have buildings that are AC'd on the inside, very cold. I mean, there's times where I'm working in a building, I have a sweatshirt on, and then it's 80 outside. So those windows have to be moving at a rate with the cold on the inside and the outside. So, and then they're putting storms or this acrylic or 1/4 inch glass and not venting it, caulking it all in. Now we have a problem. So that's what happened here. And that's the first thing I said, get off all that stuff. And then you need a painter now, right? You got to scrape, you got to prime, you have to paint, and me, because this is what it looked like. Somebody years ago, and they think around they were thinking around the 50s, somewhere around there, went around and did, quote unquote, their restoration work, and they puttied on top of the window, and they just wiped it off just enough. And this was a cement-based putty, and I mean Portland cement. It took me almost 2 years to do this church on a scaffold, inside and outside, because of that. Because I had to take, I take these little things, and I had a strong arm by and in fact, I tried to hire some apprentices, and they might have lasted a few days, and that was it. And they said, I can't do this. I've got arthritis in my arm, and because this was hard to get out of there. But it was better than taking out the entire window, which was 15 foot high, taking it back to the table, because the windows weren't bad. They were pretty good, and it was unusual. Usually I don't see that, but they were in wood sashes. They still worked. They were single hungs, and then the uppers were ventilator panels, which open up. I couldn't believe that they still worked, but they did. So we left all the windows in place, and then all this came out, new putty came in, and it was all cleaned, and then reglazed, and they're beautiful. Now they've decided not to storm them yet. So, and I told them, take time. Let the building talk to you. I always say, the building will tell you what it needs. It really will. So, and you can see how high up my scaffold, here he built all this, and how high that was. so they don't have problems with people throwing stones at it, vandalism. It's too high off the ground, so that's why they decided at the moment not to storm it, but they probably will eventually. This is what I'm doing right now in Seymour. This is Seymour Presbyterian Church. Same pastor that was in the other one was called to Seymour, so he called me. He said, Rhonda, this is one that faces south that I was telling you about, that was facing south, and on the outside is a 1/4-inch piece of glass that's against this, and it is hot, hot, hot on the inside. I mean, you want to wear your bathing suit when you're up on there, I tell you, because when I'm working, it's really, really warm. And this is the part right now that I've got cleaned. But again, I'm scaffolded up to this section and then pick everything, and anything that doesn't need to be picked, I don't touch. And sensitively cleaning it, and then it's gone through and I putty underneath the lid. Okay, so now we've got this section, and then there's more windows on either side that need to be done. But this particular job, there's only about 2 single hung sashes that need to be removed. So if something doesn't need to be removed, I don't do it. Because you do risk more cracked glass, you risk things happening if you remove it and you don't need to do it. So I leave it alone. Restoration, this is what I do mostly. This is when you're repairing pieces and you are going in like a surgeon, and you only take and you only repair what you need to repair. I'm working on St. Michael's the Archangel in Madison, Indiana. That's going to be probably a 5-year-long project for me, because all of these windows are very bad, again. And then these were also, not only were they puttied incorrectly, but somebody used silicone, and they siliconed every single crack on the inside, and any hole there is, they used tar. They used a tar substance and duct tape, and I mean, it's probably the worst project as far as the windows, and they are cracked in multiple places. The lead is bad now because of all of this, so I have to completely rebuild these. Okay? So these are the step-by-steps for those of you who wanted to know how to do this, because a couple of you asked, well, I can tackle this. Well, here we go. Okay? So interior shot, always take documentation of exterior, interior measurements. Take more than one shot in different types of light. Morning light is different than evening light, right? Light with clouds is different than sunny light. Light with the snow outside is different than, so, you try to take as many as you can. You can see here the rebars. All of these are barred, and through the years they were barred more. Somebody came in and said, oh, it's buckling, so now we got to bar it again. And then they attach those bars directly to the joints. Well, now, if that window moves, it takes everything with it too. So then I deal with that. But, window, this is an example of a window that is buckling. You can see it's buckling in the center here. But there's a rebar here. These slick rods are called saddle bars. And years ago, they were placed in right directly into the sash. Okay? So that makes it a little difficult to take this panel out. You have to take it out from the exterior side. Okay? So it's better to have it on a table. It's really difficult if it's a huge window to take it out in place. Now you better have about 4 or 5 other hands with you. Because when you take out a panel in place like this and you snip the tie wires to that rebar, now you got a panel that is wobbly and has no support, right? Because it's this that creates that support for that window, and they're tied into the sash. So, tie wires onto this rebar is the way that it used to be done, and it's the way that I like to do it.
reason why is because they were made for maintenance. You think of maintenance. Every 3 to 5 years, you'd go back to that window, and if the tie wire is loose, you just twist it a little bit. And that keeps that panel in place and reinforced. The newer way, the many stained glass artists now rebar a panel, is to use flat bar. It's just flat, and then it is also tied sometimes into the sash, but then they solder it to the joints all the way across, which is fine for like a door, because you know a door swings and you're, you know, using it all the time, but it's difficult for me because then for me to repair something that's been soldered in many different places, I have to cut it. I have to cut it out. So with this type of system, which is what they did years ago, they were thinking you just clip those wires and then release it from the rebar. Now sometimes the rebar will go with it, and if it does, that means the sash needs to be worked on. And you had a guy here that was doing wood sash, so you know they're the people that I work with to repair wood sashes, so that I can place that rebar back in. And it's just drilling a hole, putting the rebar in. Nowadays, I paint it with Rust-Oleum paint so it doesn't rust. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
This is kind of off topic. What time, when doing restoration work on the painted windows, do you, what temperature do you fire your paints at?
Depends if it's enamel or if it's silver stain or if it's black tracing paint. It's
Okay.
about 1250 to 1500.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, depending upon what enamels you use. Okay, so so in this case, this is what we had to do. And this just shows you, this is in a metal, this particular part of the window is in what we call a ventilator panel, which actually tilts in the center. So they're very easy to take out. You just pull it out of its metal sash. And then we remove it from the metal sash, and the metal goes to people that do iron work. Yeah.
Are they higher? I'm just always afraid. I just have one big stained glass window. I haven't taken it out yet, but my fear is it's just so old, it's going to break. I mean, is there a higher risk for, is it just like, is it stronger than a normal window, or?
You mean in the window, or when you're taking it out, or in
Taking it out.
taking it out?
You have to take it out. Any caution that you take yourself personally, or?
I'm used to handling it, so it doesn't, and if it breaks, I fix it, so, you know, I mean, it really, you can't be afraid. Once you're afraid, boy, she knows it. I mean, those panels know it. Yeah, they know it. But I mean, you just have to be, you can't just, you know, pull off, throw things. And I've had contractors that have brought me windows, believe me, all, you know, duct taped in and pieces missing, and I've had panels taken out that were intact, and I got them in boxes. So, you know, you have to sometimes, you know, I have to train sometimes the contractors, but if they've never done it, once they do it, then they understand how glass works, and then this panel is a panel in and of itself, you know, unless it's falling all over the place, you know. So you just have to work carefully. And before you dismantle something, you better take what we call a cartoon of it, because once you take it all apart, you got all these pieces, right? So if I were to take all this apart and I didn't make any documentation of it, boy, I better know how to put it back together. And which way to put it back together. Does the textured face out, or does the textured part of the glass face interior? And sometimes it's a little bit of both. Does the bevel or jewels face out, or do the bevel and jewels face in? You got to know all that when you're working on these. So I'm going to pass around. Now this is something I'm going to leave in here, and you can look. But there's cast jewels, there's faceted jewels in here, and there's bevel jewels. So you can see some of them are historic. but that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about that. And many Victorian or Queen Anne windows have that. But anyway, we take a cartoon, which means we take a rubbing of that. We put a piece of, I use butcher paper, you know, there's all kinds of rolled paper you can use. And I use charcoal pencils, and I take a rubbing of that, just like an old-fashioned rubbing, like when you were a kid, you know, they'd have us do rubbings. And that creates us the design, and then every single piece of glass is numbered. And then that number corresponds with some type of legend that has the color, the texture, or whatever for that glass before you take it apart. So this panel now has been taken apart. The lead has been taken off of it. Now how do I do that? I have, the Dremel tool is my friend, one of my friends, best friends. And I have to Dremel everything. I have to Dremel all the joints. Then this piece is taken off, and then we take out each piece. But we've already numbered all the pieces of glass, okay, before we do that. My daughter does a lot of this part. And then she cleans every single piece, keeps the number on there. She also notes to me, is this interior or exterior? She does the cartoons. She writes down every crack, where the rebars are. Because when I'm working on the table then, especially if I didn't do that part, I need to know all that information to be able to rebuild that panel again. So we take it apart, then it's laid back down. Now you can see here, this is before we clean the glass. Now I can see where all the cracks are, pieces that are missing, what I need to do. You can see here some, you know, silicone problems, glass that is replaced, that is different through the years. This is a different piece that's been replaced from that, and then we clean the glass. So now the glass is clean, the numbers are still on the glass. This is the way I prefer to build them, so she's numbering everything so I can see it. I always prefer to build with the texture towards me because it's a lot harder when it's turned over on the other side of the table. And then I have to determine what glass I have to replace. So that means spending hours trying to find what company has anything that's color replacement that's similar so it doesn't look funny. Also the texture. How do I get the texture? Well, I can tell you right now, because I've done 3 of these already, that there's nobody that makes this color and this texture of glass right now. So I have to do what's called plating, which means taking 2 pieces of glass, and you know, it could be, I'm just going to use this and this. It could be this glass with a clear ripple to make that color. So I've done that on quite a few jobs where I've plated glass to get the color and the texture, because I can get the texture maybe through a company, but I can't get the color. But I can get a color and smooth, so you know, you add the 2 together. So we do that a lot. It's been done a lot through the years. Tiffany did it on many of his pieces. If you ever see a true Tiffany piece that's done in copper foil, he plated 3 and 4 layers. So it's been done in a lot of different ways.
When you say plate, do you mean you fuse it?
I do not fuse it.
Okay,
No,
so it's just
but
layered.
it's a very good question. How do you put it together then? Put one on top of the other. It has to be the same size, right? And the same shape and everything. So you're grinding that on the grinder. You get it down to exactly the same. Then I use copper foil. And I wrap copper foil around that piece so that it still holds together. And then we lead it with lead, but we use a high heart lead. It's a little bit higher so that it actually, when 2 pieces go into that lead, like this, into the lead, it can receive that high heart. Because most of your pieces might be 1/8 of an inch, so now you're, you know, or 3/16, so you're adding a little bit more of a thickness there.
So we use a high hard lead, and that's available. And that's what it's for. And it's really funny because some of the manufacturers I talk to now that are not making glass since COVID, they're telling me over the phone, well, we're not running that color anymore. We're not running that texture anymore. Just plate it. I mean, they're even saying that. Just plate it. Well, it costs double the money. You know, you're using 2 pieces of glass and double my time. You know, now I don't mind plating, but it's like when you look at a piece now and I go, oh, I gotta plate half of that piece, half of that panel. You know, I know how much time it's gonna take then. This is mostly, this whole church, many pieces will need to be plated because you can't see this right here, but this is a deep purple and nobody's making it. And nobody's making it with the ripple. So I have to plate it to get to the color that I need and the texture. And I'm not going to just put a piece of smooth glass there. I'm sorry, that's not me. Somebody else might do that, but that's not how I am. I'm an artist too. So I see things. I was a designer for years. I see it. I can see it across the room if it's not the same. Most people may not care about it. And I work with the client on that too, because some clients will say, I don't care. If you can match the color, I'm not worried about the texture. Or I want the cracks in it. Or I've had clients say, I'm paying you, I want no cracks. I want no cracks retained in that panel. For me, it's like, well, it's old, it's gonna crack. I mean, you have an old panel. I don't mind cracks seen in panels. So I don't replace everything. I really don't, unless I absolutely have to. And then, then I go through all this process of trying to match glass and looking at the glass on a light table. The cracked glass that I can repair, and I always put back in, I edge glue using Hextol glue, which is a conservation glue, and that's just one of the glues I use. And it is cured by UV light. So you have to have it on a light table for 24 hours. Okay? So I probably use about 5 different types of 2-part epoxy glues. I've tried many different types through the years, and I know which one will set real fast for me if I'm building a panel and I need it to set. And I know, like Hextol, if it's a museum quality piece, I use Hextol because that's the conservation way. And then I will even go to the extent of coloring my epoxy to the exact color of glass so you can barely see that crack. Now that's one more step that I do because I'm just rather have it that way. So now this is building it. So for those of you who want to know how to build things, you have to have some type of layup board, I call them. And we make up all of our layup boards with OSB board and rails. So I have rails and on a corner, it has to be a corner that's, square. Now, I've done this for so many years and many, many days. I cheat and I don't use layup boards as much anymore. But like my daughter has to use a layup board because with a square corner because she just hasn't done a lot of laying up of glass. I can pretty much see it in my head, so I know what I'm doing. And then that cartoon that I showed you, I always take at least 3 cartoons. Sometimes you have to have one as a pattern for your glass so that if you're cutting out a piece of glass, you need to be able to cut out that cartoon. And most of the time, my cartoons are up on the wall. And I'm referring to them the entire time that I'm laying this up. And I'm looking at it and going, is this right, size? And then calling my daughter sometimes, hey, did you take it? I don't understand this. I don't understand your notes. So you have to take real good notes as you go along. And you can see the cartoon underneath here. Now, this was the first one that I did of this job. I don't use the cartoons underneath them anymore because I know that pattern very, very well. So, I just have it on the wall so that I can constantly refer to it. But your layup board with your rails, and then you can see the lead, the new lead that I'm running across there, and you can see these nails, and then my hammer. So you are putting that piece down, you're measuring the lead, you're cutting the lead with your lead cutters, and then you are hammering it tight. You can't have a loose, wobbly piece. I mean, this is 3 foot by 3 foot, so you want all your glass to be tight into the lead. And while I am talking about that, I'm going to pass around lead, and it's okay for you to hold it. Just wash your hands later. But you'll see that there's a groove on either side, and it looks like a heart or an H, and that's where one piece of glass goes into the other. And I'm passing around about 3 or 4 different types of profiles, because you have to decide that too. There's another decision, okay? And I match the profile as best as possible with the historic window that I can. So there's the lead, and then I'll talk about zinc in a minute, but here's pieces of zinc. And zinc is a hard metal, which means it's not pliable, so you have to use a Dremel to be able to even cut it. So I'll pass this around, and you can see different profiles of zinc. So I'm laying this up, and you can see here, I got to this point. Now you run across pieces of glass that need to be epoxied and the cracks to be repaired, so you have to wait. Sometimes I can't get the glass yet, or it hasn't come in yet, so you have to wait, you know. So there's times where I have 6 tables and I have 6 jobs going all at the same time, because I'm rotating around depending upon my wait time on different things as I'm going. You can also see I have a picture up there, so sometimes I have photographs so that I can kind of see as I'm going. And then I also have, like I said, the cartoon on the wall. And here we're laying it up a little bit more. You start from the corner and you work across and you work up. And these are the tie wires. It's a little fuzzy, but the tie wires are soldered onto the joints. They're not soldered in the middle of a piece of lead. And if you run across that, it's done incorrectly. It has to be soldered into a joint, because that's what holds it better. It's not going, if you solder a tie wire on a middle piece of a lead and it'll pull. It has nothing for it to hold to. So you only do it on the joints going across a panel. Yeah.
I have a question. If you ever have a job that's so big, is it possible to have somebody custom make that certain color and texture of glass? You know,
Nobody that would pay for it. Yeah. I'm serious. Yeah. Because Kokomo Glass would run a run of a certain custom color and texture, but they want to do a big, big job of it. Yeah. So you'd have to buy 32 by 42 sheets, and many of them, you know, for them to run something like that. And people just, yeah, pay. And I work with a lot of residential people, and they, yeah. And so that's a good question to lead to the fact that I salvage glass. I have a whole wall of salvage pieces, and I mean small pieces. I do not buy panels and take them apart to salvage or sell them on eBay. I don't believe in that. But if somebody has already taken apart a panel, and I don't know that they did it, I just go, don't see, don't hear, you know, and they're a flea market vendor, and they have a box of glass, and they don't even know where it comes from, you bet I'm going to buy it. Or if they know where it comes from, I label it so that I know. I just bought probably 20 panels from a contractor friend of mine down in Louisville, and I bought them from him, even though he took them out of a dumpster for free. I still bought them. And those will be used, and I want to return them back into homes. So I do a lot of that too. If somebody calls me and says, I have a transom size and I need a panel, I probably have an old panel that might fit your particular house and date, and all I would have to do is restore it. You know, so I stockpile panels too in my warehouse. So, you know, you have to kind of go and really look at things, and I travel a lot of different places because glass, the colors aren't made. And the greens are really hard to find because the greens they made in the 70s, the EPA did a lot of rules and regulations, and they can't use the same metallics or the minerals now, so the green today is not going to look like the green from, you know, like the 70s or the 60s. So it's not, you can't find it. So this is the panel done and back into the sash. And you can see this particular sash I took to the Metal Iron Works. They sandblasted it, they painted it. It was all ready to go. We took all the old rebars off and kept only the existing original rebars, which is all it needed. It only needed 2. It's only 3 by 3. So a rebar is put about every 12 to 15 inches going up a panel. And you can see it goes across. So you also, when you're designing something new, you keep that in mind too. Where's that rebar, or where's the structural element going to go across my design? Because in some, you know, this case, luckily it went above the nameplate. But you know, you have to kind of think about that too in new panels when you're working with new. Let me hurry up and get going. So this is with the reflective light. You can see that purple I was telling you about. It's very difficult to find. And this is the panel next to the next one I have to do from the outside. Okay? So let's go on. Oh. Nope. Okay, so repairs are typical work, and that's where I said I feel like a surgeon sometimes. Here is a panel, and you can see the replacement glass is different. Can you see that? Gold. Well, it's sitting next to what I call like a caramel color. No longer made. Okay? So what do? You know, I have to plate it. And then you can also see the damage that I had to take out. All this was damaged in that panel, but I only removed what was damaged, and everything else stays intact. And you know, I took these out too. So, and then plated the glass. And this is it on the light table already in the sash. We set the panels in sashes and we glaze. My daughter is a beautiful glazer, so she does that work. And then it's installed by our one of our contractors that installs, who does wood sash. This is an example. A couple of you asked questions to me today about stenciled patterns. This is a church in Ripley, Ohio, that all the windows are stenciled. They did stenciling in about the turn of the century as a way to get a pattern on glass, a quick way to get a pattern on glass, and a little bit less expensive way. But now it's really expensive. It's almost the opposite because I have to make these by hand. They were originally, stencils were done in like brass sheets and they were cut out. Now I have to take this pattern and actually cut everything out by hand on a piece of stencil material that you use to sandblast glass with. And then that's all got to be cut out, and then the piece of glass has to be painted. And then I have to scratch out all the negative sides with wooden tools, and then it's fired in the kiln. So in this particular case, this was an accident. Painters were up on scaffold painting the interior of the church. They were dropping the scaffold down, and somebody's tool dropped off the scaffold, hit the glass, and I was called. You know, so. Here's my piece, and here's the original. And I did it all by hand. So hours of work, but really neat. I love to find these brass stencils. So if any of you find stencils in a basement somewhere, call me. I will buy them. You know, we're looking for those all the time. So. This is another real quick piece. I think this is a piece that I replaced. This is a piece I replaced. This is a piece I replaced. And this is a piece. I think there were
2 or 3 pieces here along this edge here that I actually painted to match what was there and replaced them for this particular panel. This is an example of somebody sent me a picture of this. It's an octagonal light, and it was in the back of her SUV. She said, Rhonda, can you fix this? I'm opening up a store, and I want it hung in my store. I'm like, oh, okay. Sure, I can fix anything. I'll try. You know, not realizing that the whole thing was apart, and it was zinc, not lead. And these pieces were copper foiled. So I was using this, and the glass is etched. So I actually did rebuild this whole thing. So if you want to get your hair done at Rusted Roots in Madison, Indiana, you'll see my light there. And I call it my light because, boy, it took me a long time to figure this out. You know, you're learning as you're going along. I mean, I am not, I've done this for many, many years, but every time I touch a panel, I learn from the craftsmen that did it before me. And it's my duty to try to do it the best possible way for the next person down the road. So I matched the glass, I etched it, fired all of that, and these pieces that were missing, luckily I had vintage glass that matched it, copper foiled it again, reconfigured all the zinc. You can't find this profile anymore that has, you know, like a double jointed elbow or something to hold an octagonal shape. And this lamp was this tall, so it was heavy. And then you have to, how do you put it together? You got all these pieces, so then I had to kind of figure out, I put it in a trash can, I tried, you know, how do you put this thing back together again? And because not having a mold, so you have to kind of make yourself a mold to set it in. This one was repaired because their pit bull went through it. So, you know, I get all kinds of things. This was a side light window in a beautiful Queen Anne house, and I love their dog because I did get to meet the dog. Just a wonderful dog, but doesn't like mailman. Anybody in a uniform. And the dog literally went through the side light. So the whole bottom portion needed to be replaced. And when she called me and sent pictures, I said, well, is it zinc or lead? I don't know. I said, okay, just don't worry about it. I'll pick it up. I had a friend bring it down. It happened to be zinc, so that meant I had to cut all that out. You know, if it was lead, I would have probably been easier to be able to repair it. And by that time, I also noticed, too, that her zinc was very, very pitted. And that's what happens to zinc. It pits with the pollution in the air. So it gets deteriorated very quickly. Zinc was used, again, at the turn of the century, thinking that it would be more durable to hold the windows, but they didn't realize that we'd have such pollution in the air and acid rain that would deteriorate it. So in many times like this, I just completely redid it and re-zinced the whole thing. And they love it. But anyways, adaptation. A couple of you have asked me about that today. This was a window that a friend of mine actually had folded in half and put it behind his sofa. And he had it stored there for 20 years. It came out of Cincinnati, a church, Cincinnati, that was torn down. So he bought the window. And I went over to his house, and he's like, Rhonda, you got to see this. And he pulled this out. I said, oh, my gosh, Jim, you got to fold it. He said, well, I can't. I don't have a big enough place for it. So he folded the window, put it behind his sofa, sat there all this time. And now he's building a bathroom with a hot tub. So this is to go in front of the hot tub, right? And so I said, yeah, sure, I can restore it. And I said, what church? And he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I'd like to know the history of these things. But anyway, this was an arched piece, okay? And of course it was, you know, this part was one, and that was the second part. And so, and he didn't want an arched window, he had a square opening. So we added all this up above to kind of match it a little bit. And then I said to him, I said, well, we better cut this in half because this is a pretty tall window.
And what we did is instead of rebar then, well, there's some rebar in here, but it's such a large window that we used like these metal T brackets and then just, you know, set it on there so that it would hold itself there. He loves it. It's just, but that's an adaptation. This is another one. This is, I bought this from, we found this window at an antique market. Some man brought it from Pennsylvania, was taken out of a huge mansion there that was torn down, I believe. And I put Pittsburgh, PA up there so that I could remember. And I had it stored, and a friend of mine down in Louisville said, I got this house that I'm restoring. It has this huge window in the master bedroom. Do you have anything, or can you build something for me? I said, well, just give me the sizes. So he gave me the size. I'm like, oh my gosh, this window almost fits perfect. So I called him up and I said, I think I got a window in the back that might fit this perfect. It's a little bit bigger, so I'm going to have to reduce the size. But I think I can, you know, do that. So I had to reduce the size almost, you know, but I used part of these pieces. This is the window laying on its side now, okay? And then this is it in the place. And that's how big this window was. That large window you just seen only filled up half of that opening. And Dennis was all so happy about that. This is the master bedroom window facing out. He told me later that it's in a community down in Louisville that actually has almost that same emblem used on many windows. And I said, you're kidding. He goes, no. When I installed it, he said, a couple of neighbors down the street came over and said, who did this for you? Because our houses have that same logo. I said, well, this came from Pittsburgh. And he's like, it's perfect. And then he painted the master suite in that green color. So it worked out. And then I took the rest of that glass and I built the lower sash all brand new to match it. So now it's a full window. So that's an adaptation. This is one I'm working on right now, which was actually an upper sash and a lower sash. We're turning it this way, and it'll be a transom above a big bay window in a Victorian Queen Anne house. So, and she's making a few changes. She wants a couple different, she wants these to be the same, you know, aqua color, and I'm making those changes now. So, but that'll look very nice, and it's going back into a house. This was one I bought at an auction. So, and I bought it. So I don't pick these up for free. Reconstruction. This is one from a fire. Somebody sent me a photograph from Philadelphia. And they're living in Maryland, and their house in Philadelphia caught fire, which was a stone Queen Anne. So the roof went up, everything came down into the house, and the firemen went in and smashed all the windows to get into the house to put out the fire. And this was a window that was a side light on either side of the double doors. Okay, so there were two. This is what she sent me, a 4x6 photograph. Okay, got on the phone and I talked to them. And first of all, I looked at it and went, oh, wow. You know, this would have been an opulent window in a stone structure. So I said, is this the only photograph you have? She said, yes, it's the only thing that was left. And quite frankly, we didn't take pictures of our stained glass, you know, and most people don't. They don't. So if you have a art glass or stained glass window, go home, take photographs of it right now, today, because you don't know if that'll be there. And if something happens to your building, and I have to interpret something like this, it's difficult. But, so I start looking at this. I took the photograph, shot it out on the wall. I'm a teacher, I have an old opaque projector, moved it back and forth, you know. Got to the size. I said, do you know what the size is? They said, yeah, we got the size because we're rebuilding the house. And I said, okay. They gave me the size, and I kind of got it. But if you notice that this window's crooked, I mean, this picture's crooked, and it's a little bit, well, what happened is they were taking a picture of somebody, you know, and it was back there. So it's a little skewed. And as talked to them again, I called them, and I blew this up on my phone, I blew it up on the wall, I blew it up on my Mac, and I said, well, it looks to me like these are jewels, and this has kind of got this kind of texture, and so I called them again. I said, do you have any pieces at all? Because most fires, glass does not burn up. It's the lead that might burn, but the glass is still there. Do you have any shards? Oh yeah, we have shards. I'm like, oh, good. Send me the shards. So they boxed up this in a box from Maryland and sent it to me, and I opened it up and it smelled like the fire, you know.
Yeah.
And everything was all taped like this and black as coal, you know, from the fire. But I could see this ripple texture is painted, so that tells me it's on the exterior. So, you know, it's like being MacGyver. You just kind of have to look at every single piece and decide what was facing interior, what was facing outside, and I could tell by the fire. So I called them up and I said, well, the smoke is on this side. This is where this was. Yeah, you were right, Rhonda, you were right. And I said, I could kind of tell that this is where the fire started. She said, yes, that's where it started, in the hallway, in the hallway. I'm like, well, I could tell that by cleaning the glass and working on the glass. So now I got parts of patterns. I don't have all patterns, parts of patterns. So I laid out what I had, and my cat loves to be right there. She watches everything. So I laid out what I had. Again, I'm numbering all this. This took months, because I was also trying to match the glass, and I wanted to use vintage glass, and I wanted to use the glass that they sent me that was left over too. So you have to kind of, you got to do it in a way that nobody knows, you know, that you can't really tell. So, and then each of the sections that were left, I made, you know, patterns of, and then I matched it to what I drew in the beginning. Nowhere's near. It was off. It was off because the photograph was skewed. So I had to redraw it again and redraw it a third time, leave the photograph, and then by all the glass, we cleaned all the original that was left and tried to match new to that. And I had to build two. There was not enough glass to build two from what they gave me. So I had to decide, okay, 3 pieces new here, 3 pieces new there, you know, kind of just, and old pieces, and then I started building this. And there were some parts of this that, I kid you not, the glass was this tiny. So I had to use tweezers to pull it in. These are the 2 pieces done. So, and they're 37 by 70, I mean, you know, these are large pieces. So, and we had to build all new sashes, so I have a guy that builds the sashes for me, so we could set them and then deliver them to Maryland. And now they're in the process of putting all these in now. This is all jewels, and I did use some of the old jewels, and I just had to kind of, you know, sparse them in different places so that it would be right. This is one I just did. This was a fire in Carmel, Indiana. The house was burnt down. All she had was 1 shot. So, oh, that's fuzzy. She just sent me this, but she wanted different colors, but same kind of thing. So and all I did was do it from a photograph. And then new commissions. I have people in Louisville, you know, they have windows that don't have glass, but they have a Queen Anne home, and they like, you know, beveled glass in. So I've done those. Door panels where people would like a door panel that matches their home. So I look at all the details on a historic building to see how I can incorporate that into a panel. And many times I have to go to Historic Preservation Commission meetings, and we have to get things approved as well, so we do that. Somebody asked me about numbers above their door. I've done that before, and in this particular case, I tried to match the pattern of the cornice work with what I was doing there. This one I just finished, I think last year we installed on a house in Madison, Indiana. I think it's 1870s, And of course, he wanted bevels with a large bevel. This is a door panel that's, I think, 3/4. It goes almost all the way down. And I matched jewels to the paint that he has on his house as well as the brick on the building. So there's my daughter and there's my grandson, because he likes to come and clean. So that's it. And yes,
Going back to cleaning, is there like a general yearly maintenance you should do to taking care of your stained glass? Like, should you clean it once a year with distilled water? How often?
if you'd like to clean it with distilled water and a soft rag, that's about all you need to do. And I would say about every 3 to 5 years, if there's rebar, you look at the tie wires and make sure they're, you know, tight and they're screwed, you know, they're twisted and tight, because sometimes they pop off. And then the other thing, you'll hear,